I don't know. Did you hear that? Recording in progress.
Yep.
Heard it.
Okay. There's Dan. Hi, Dan.
What's up, Steve?
Just getting started here.
Liking the hat, Steve.
Oh, do you recognize it at all?
Yeah, they're one of our partners at the Field of Dreams. I love them.
Exactly. Dan's talking about baseballism. I wore the hat just for you, Carmen.
It looks like Valentine's and baseball all rolled into one.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed it's red because I don't think it's necessarily meant to be Valentine's Day. It's for the love of baseball, but
Yeah.
I guess red and love go together.
That's right.
Whatever.
It's great.
Yeah. It also says on the inside of the
Oh yeah,
rim,
I love the game. All right.
yeah, which I thought was a pretty cool movie. Well, okay, guys, we'll get started. Let's wait another minute. Give a few people a chance to get in. I have a short agenda. As is usual for a Field of Dreams SABR Day meeting, we'll just sort of wing it. I have a few items to bring up, and then we'll just kind of open it up. Anybody have any specific items they might want to add while we're here?
Well, Steve, we should first congratulate Babe Ruth on his birthday today.
Yeah,
Hank Aaron on his
yesterday.
Hank Aaron on his birthday yesterday. He would have been 88 years old.
Right.
And
okay.
on the 31st, we had Nolan Ryan, Jackie Robinson, and Ernie Banks all had their birthday the same day. So I don't think you can find a week in the year that has as many prominent baseball people that have their birthdays in that 1 week. So happy birthday to some of the best.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Oh,
Say, Steve, was anybody from Iowa on that Landmarks Committee meeting last Monday? Because they just launched that. I'm going to be trying to scour Minnesota, and maybe there's some people there who would want to do Iowa landmarks.
I tried to get into I signed up for the meeting. Unfortunately, I had to work until 7:30 that day. So
You have there's a link to the recording that explains it all too. In fact, I'll throw that into the chat if anybody wants to watch it.
Yeah, I think I saw the link. I need to watch that. I'm gonna probably watch that later today.
yeah. Would you send it to me, Stu? Because I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about, and I'd like to.
Yeah,
Look
and
at
here
that.
I'll put it first. I'll just throw it in this in the chat room.
In the
So,
chat, okay.
Yeah, that's but we're trying to, you got a lot there in Iowa. You go out to Van Meter, there's a few things to catalog, and
So SABR is starting a catalog of baseball landmarks.
yeah, so when you
Cool.
go out and hit the road and you want to go see what things you should throw on your itinerary, this will have them.
Great. Right. Okay. Wow. Okay. Welcome officially to the Field of Dreams chapter SABR Day meeting. Our first item on the agenda is welcome, please, Clayton Trutor. Is that how you pronounce it?
Exactly. That.
Okay. Clayton is the what do you call yourself? Chief?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, I'm the chair in the state of Vermont.
The
for
chair.
SABR.
Okay, chair of the Vermont chapter. We call her. I'm the umpire in chief for our chapter.
Well, I think I'm going to adopt that. I never knew what to call myself, so I think that's a much better title.
We have a concessionaire who's not with us. I thought he might be, but maybe later. Which is the a baseball equivalent of a treasurer, and so we try to keep our titles a little breezy there, but Clayton wants to tell us about is it your book? It's your book, right?
Yep, it's my new book. It came out last Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
The chair's all yours.
Okay, great. My name is Clayton Trutor. I'm the chair of the Vermont chapter of SABR. I also write for Nation about college basketball and college football. And I'm a professor at Norwich University, which is a small military college in Vermont. And I'm the author of a new book called Loserville, How Professional Sports Remade Atlanta and How Atlanta Remade Professional Sports. It came out on Tuesday from the University of Nebraska Press. Is it okay if I share the screen to show the cover off?
Oh, sure.
Okay, great. Okay, here we go. This is the cover of Loserville. Loserville is essentially the story of Atlanta's pursuit of pro sports in the 1960s, the arrival of teams between 1966 when the Braves get there and 1972 when they get the NHL with the Atlanta Flames, the first hockey team of any sort in the South, professional hockey team of any sort in the South. And it goes into the early years of pro sports in Atlanta and the often lukewarm response that different pro sports teams in Atlanta receive. Atlanta, in many ways, is on the cutting edge of expansion cities for pro sports. There certainly had been relocations beforehand. There had been expansions into different cities. Atlanta, I would argue, was the first city to make a full-throated effort to bring in all the major pro sports almost simultaneously. They have a mayor named Ivan Allen who gets elected in large part on a platform called Major League City. He wants Atlanta to have the prestige of being a big league town. He thinks Atlanta's economic status merits that it belongs alongside New York and Los Angeles and Chicago in the standings, which would make them, in fact, peers in his mind. He also saw bringing in pro sports as a source of civic unity. From the late 19th century onward, Atlanta had been fantastic at luring business from other parts of the country, factories from the north, branch plants of large corporations. For a time, Atlanta was called the New York of the South because basically every big corporation had an office in Atlanta. Ivan Allen, the new mayor, is setting his sights more broadly. He wants Atlanta to be a major cultural force in the country, too. And he saw pro sports as the means of doing this. If you look at this stadium here, this is Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, the home of the Braves, the home of the Atlanta Falcons in the National Football League. It opens in 1965. The Braves begin play there in 1966 after a protracted legal battle with the Milwaukee Braves, which included a series of lawsuits and court injunctions and the like. This is situated among a group of 32 lanes of interstate highway called Spaghetti Junction, the largest convergence of roads in the South. Does anybody know who picked this location to be the place of Atlanta Fulton County Stadium? It is not someone involved with the Braves. It is not the mayor of Atlanta or any other prominent person.
It is Charlie Finley.
Charlie Finley, exactly. Charlie Finley picked this location for Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. In 1963, he's having trouble with Kansas City. He wants to get a new stadium built. The moment he buys the team, he's in a contentious relationship with the local political leadership and looking for another town to bring his team to. Finley is the chairman of the Easter Seals Committee, the state of Missouri. The chairman for the state of Georgia was a Furman Bisher. Bisher was the sports editor of the Atlanta Journal and had been probably the most prominent booster of the idea of making Atlanta major league before Ivan Allen got elected mayor in 1961. He began serving in 62. Bisher and Finley become acquainted at a National Easter Seals meeting. Essentially, Bisher serves as Finley's shoulder to cry on. And Bisher tells him, hey, we just elected a mayor who wants to make Atlanta a major league city, and he will do what it takes to happen. So 2 days later, Finley gets on a plane, heads to Atlanta, gets in Furman Bisher's car, and they drive around the city looking at prospective locations. Ivan Allen had already given some ideas about some places potentially to put a stadium in the city. They tended to be on the outskirts of town, and Charlie Finley didn't like that. He wanted his ballpark to be a centerpiece. So as they were heading back toward the airport and Finley was disappointed, he sees this big hole in the ground among all these lanes of interstate highway. It had previously been a neighborhood. It had been cleared out in the late 50s during urban renewal. It was slated to become affordable housing. But the minute Charlie Finley showed interest in this space, saying, if you put a stadium there, I will put my ball team here, Atlanta gets the gears going. The land all of a sudden becomes the stadium authority's land. And Atlanta gets going a process to build a stadium. Unfortunately for Atlanta, and unfortunately for Charlie Finley, the American League is looking down on the way Finley is operating in Kansas City. and they don't want to reward him for being such a pugnacious character. So they vote down Charlie Finley's effort to put his team in Atlanta. They also have a concern taking a retread franchise, one that had really struggled for a bunch of years, and also a retread owner, and sticking them in as eager and juicy a market as Atlanta, one that was obviously willing to invest in sports, and one that was also the centerpiece of a 7-state region where there were no other pro sports teams. It seemed like Charlie Finley was a waste in their mind. So the American League said no. Undaunted, Bisher, Allen, basically all the other members of the city's political and corporate leadership formed a junket, head to the 1963 All-Star game in Cleveland, and start begging for a big league ball club. They find somebody else looking for a team in Milwaukee, or somebody else looking to move in Milwaukee. In 1962, the Braves had been sold by a guy named Lou Perini, who had brought the Braves from Boston to Milwaukee, overseen great success in the franchise. This new group of basically young industrialists, the sons of basically wealthy corporate leaders in Chicago, a group known as the LaSalle Corporation. They were called in the Milwaukee press, they were called the Rover Boys, which were a collection of mischievous young kids that a group of children's books got written about back in the 20s and 30s. These Rover Boys very quickly were looking for a new home for their ball club. Why would a city that had so much success so recently, the Bushville era, winning a World Series, getting to another one, drawing so well throughout the 1950s, why would they be looking for a new market? Well, there's a few reasons for this. First of all, the new Braves owners were almost immediately disappointed with the gold in the hills around Milwaukee, in the sense that they imitated the Packers. The Packers very famously sell stocks in their team to finance the organization. They had a stock sale in the 20s. They had one in the late 50s, which helped revitalize City Stadium, which is now Lambeau Field. And they said, we should do this with the Braves. So the Braves ownership has a stock sale, like 6 months after they buy the team. The sports fans in Wisconsin see this for the cash grab that it is. The Braves put up 120,000 shares of common stock in the team. They sold like 15,000 of them. They lost a bunch of money on the whole process. So from that time onward, the Rover Boys are looking for a new home for their ball club. There's some other issues too. The Braves are starting to struggle a little bit in the standings. The arrival of the Twins in Minnesota cuts off some of the potential fan base for this team as well, not only in Minnesota, also in Iowa. They lose a bunch of radio affiliates in the northern part of their fan base. To the south, they obviously have the Chicago teams, which are cutting them off from potential support. So they're very hemmed in. Also in the local press, you have the Green Bay Packers under Lombardi starting to emerge as one of the NFL's powers, and they're taking some of the shine off the Milwaukee Braves also in the local sporting press. So for a bunch of different reasons, the Milwaukee Braves are looking for a new city. They find it in Atlanta. In October 1964, like 2 days after the season ended, they announced that they were going to move their franchise to Atlanta. Wisconsin, the Milwaukee County immediately files suit, gets an injunction against them. 1965, the Braves spent a lame duck season in Milwaukee, which is a very contentious and tough situation for the players there. Eventually, the Braves get to Milwaukee in 66. The owners think this is going to be greener pastures. Certainly, the Braves are an improving team. In 1965, they'd spent much of the season in first place in the National League, despite getting very little fan support locally. They go to Atlanta. Sporting News picks them to win the National League. A lot of national baseball writers have very high hopes for the Braves in 66. The team ends up struggling out of the gate. Their attendance is a little bit disappointing. And this ends up being a bellwether for the Braves' first decade in town. The Braves have a bit of an aberration in 1969 where they win the National League West in the first year of the divisional divisional era. But from 66 onward, with the exception of 1969, the Braves' attendance, which started out a little bit disappointing, the Braves in their first year in Atlanta drew like 400,000 fewer people than Milwaukee did in its first year in town in 53, than the Braves in their first year in Milwaukee. The Braves' attendance goes down and down and down. In 1971, they failed to draw 1 million fans, which is a fairly minor threshold for attendance. The Braves do not draw 1 million fans again until 1980. They find themselves in very serious financial trouble, despite having Hank Aaron, the best-known player of baseball, pursuing the home run record, Phil Niekro, Rico Cardi, all kinds of other prominent players in this era. They have a team that had 3 guys who hit 40 home runs in the same season in 73. It didn't matter. Attendance went down and down and down and down. Eventually, this group, the Rover Boys, after the 1975 season, when the Braves draw fewer than 600,000 fans, sell the team to Ted Turner. The Falcons, playing in the same stadium, have a fairly similar story. The minute Atlanta Stadium Atlanta begins to build the stadium, both the NFL and AFL, which wouldn't have been Atlanta the time of day beforehand, are suddenly fighting it out to see who can be the Atlanta franchise. The NFL wins. The guy who becomes the owner is an insurance salesman named Rankin Smith, who was fantastic at selling insurance, and by all accounts was a nice guy, but basically brought insurance business smarts to the football business and relied on a lot of basically his associates to run the team. The Falcons struggle out of the gate, don't make the NFL playoffs until 1978, and end up being one of the worst drawing and worst performing teams in the NFL throughout this time period. Atlanta's other building is the Omni Coliseum, which becomes the home of the Hawks of the NBA and the Flames of the NHL. Atlanta did not have a strong tradition of supporting basketball, and that showed certainly with the Hawks. Despite having Pete Maravich on the team, the best-known basketball player in the country, they remained one of the worst drawing teams in the NBA throughout this time period. In terms of the Flames, they're actually kind of the surprise in Atlanta. You would think a southern city, why would people be interested in hockey? It was incredibly novel in the South. Nobody had ever seen a hockey game before, basically. Knoxville, Tennessee had a minor league team for a couple years, but major pro hockey had no background in the South. And it was a very novel attraction in Atlanta. The team drew very well. They actually performed very well in their early years. They had a season ticket base of almost 10,000 at one point and made the playoffs in 6 of their 8 seasons in Atlanta. They end up leaving town less because of their own performance on the ice and their poor performance at the box office, and more because their owner, Tom Cousins, who owned both the Hawks, the Flames, and ran the Omni Coliseum, ran into trouble with his real estate empire in downtown Atlanta. And some oil men in Calgary, Alberta, offer $20 million for the team, and they end up leaving town. The Hawks end up staying in town because Ted Turner scoops them up in 1977. The Falcons, there's talk of them leaving Atlanta all the way up until basically Arthur Blank, their current owner, buys the team in 2002. So, in many ways, this Atlanta creates the model that expansion cities use to become major league by rolling out the red carpet for the big pro sports league, building publicly financed stadiums with Atlanta Fulton County Stadium and the Omni. You see many cities, San Diego, Tampa, Jacksonville, Phoenix, model themselves after what Atlanta did as their way to get major league. Many of them also face the same struggles, and oftentimes for similar reasons. Atlanta's team struggled on the field in part because they had either absentee ownership in the case of the Braves or novice ownership in the case of Tom Cousins, the Hawks and Flames, as well as Rankin Smith, who owns the Falcons. In terms of things aggravating this further, in terms of their success at the box office, obviously losing is not conducive to drawing well, but Atlanta is also a very spread out and suburban place. People who are driving 35 miles in to come to work, then are driving that back out to get home, don't necessarily want to drive back in for a game back to downtown Atlanta. Atlanta's a place with a lot of transplants from other parts of the country, people who don't really have strong ties to the region. They may come and see the Cubs or come and see the Mets or their home team, but the idea that they're going to regularly patronize Atlanta's teams didn't prove to be the case. For locals, it's not like they simply started being interested in sports because the big leagues got to town. College football had a remarkably passionate fan base with Georgia and Georgia Tech in town. Stock car racing frequently drew 100,000 people to the Atlanta Motor Speedway. You had boating, you had golf, you had professional wrestling, which frequently performed the same night as the Hawks at the Omni. You had wrestling about a mile away from the Omni at the city's armory, which was built during the Cleveland administration, that almost always outdrew the Hawks when they were competing with each other. There'd be 5,000 people hooting and hollering and screaming and going crazy at pro wrestling, and 3,200 people sitting in plush, beautiful seats at the brand new Omni to watch Pete Maravich play basketball. So the locals did not give up on their existing sporting passions simply because they were Atlanta teams. So for a range of factors, Atlanta and many other expansion cities have not turned out as well as anticipated, at least in the early years, as well as they anticipated when becoming big league towns. Another issue is getting so many so quickly proved very difficult to digest. There really wasn't a honeymoon period for a lot of these teams because they were immediately competing with other brand new teams in town. If you compare this to some other cities that only got one team at a time, for example, Phoenix, they got the Suns in 1968, 20 years before they get any other teams. The Suns performed well. They drew a very passionate fan base and did very well in Phoenix in their early decades. If you look at Salt Lake City, when they get the Utah Jazz, they get one team. They support that team very well. They end up performing well on the court as well. So getting a lot of teams at once often proves to be a difficult situation in disguise, which Atlanta found and other cities such as San Diego and Phoenix later on in the 80s and 90s found as well. Those are the basics of my book. I'd love to answer any questions about it you guys might have.
If you have a question, you'll have to take yourself off of mute.
For a little more self-promotion here, this is the promo code here. If you're interested in the book, it's from the University of Nebraska Press, which does a lot of baseball sports books. If you use that, you'll save yourself like 13 or 14 bucks on the book if you're interested. I'll put that in the chat too. But any questions? I'd love to answer. You guys have?
Do I need to raise my hand or can I just talk?
Good talk, bro.
Does the book cover at all the Turner media empire thing with TBS, TNT, and the spread of the Braves nationally that kind of made them an oddball team? I mean, they had this tiny little regional allegiance, but they nationally, it seemed like they were everywhere in the 70s and 80s.
Absolutely. I mean, Turner is the savior of this book. I mean, Atlanta would have probably lost both the Braves and the Hawks without him. The Braves in 1976, before Turner buys the team, were considering splitting games with the Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans. There was talk of them relocating to Seattle, talk of them relocating to Toronto, both cities that very soon thereafter get big league teams. So Turner, he gets the Braves and the Hawks to be cheap programming on TBS, which he's beginning to beam across the country. And there would oftentimes be lots of people watching it around the country, but very few people actually in the stands at these games. Turner would bring people to sit behind home plate to make it look like a much better crowd than it actually was. You'd be in this cavernous empty stadium, but boy, it looked like a hot ticket behind home plate. And certainly as that team gets better in the early 80s, the whole America's team marketing actually pays off. There's an excellent Sports Illustrated article from 82 talking about how Bismarck, North Dakota, and Reno, Nevada, and Anchorage, Alaska were suddenly Braves country. So they developed this while having struggles at home. They had a genuinely national fan base because there just weren't that many other places to get big league baseball at the time. Eventually, WGN begins to do the same thing. WOR out of New York begins to broadcast in a lot of the country too. But yeah, the Braves are the first team to really broadcast nationally, and it annoyed the hell out of the other owners. They sued him on a couple of occasions about this. He actually had the same impact in pro wrestling too, Turner, because historically wrestling had been a very regional business with all these basically city or regional based promotions. He begins taking his Georgia Championship Wrestling, which becomes World Championship Wrestling later on, if you guys are familiar with that, broadcasting it across the country. And it's a big problem for the wrestling promoters because there'd be some guy that just left their town. He had a different name in Atlanta and he was a bad guy all of a sudden. It was very confusing to wrestling fans in different parts of the country. So Turner, by creating a national audience for baseball, for basketball, for pro wrestling too, he challenges a lot of the establishment in different pro sports leagues. And certainly he loses money for a lot of years with the Braves too. This is a struggling franchise at the box office. It's his programming for his network, certainly. But I don't think Turner was really making money on the Braves probably until they have their championship runs in the early 90s. Part of the problem with Turner is he relied on a lot of his associates to play prominent roles in the organization for his first decade and a half. And it certainly showed too. I mean, the Braves finished in last place 8 out of 15 years in his first 15 years of ownership. They have the aberration of too, but were often very bad. And it's finally when John Schuerholz becomes GM that they turn things around. I hope that answered your question. I know I went off on about 10 different paths on that, but.
No, that was great. I actually have lived in Georgia for the last 5 years. I lived down outside of Savannah, and everything you just said resonates completely with my perception of the experience of sports in this state and this region. So I'm intrigued. I'm looking forward to reading it. It sounds like a really good book.
Thank you. Thanks. I've spent 10 years working on it. Part of it, I had no connection to Georgia or Atlanta. I picked a city that was emblematic of the shifts I wanted to talk about. Initially, I wanted to write a history of pro sports franchise relocations. It started when I was in grad school. My area of interest is the history of American cities. My advisor wisely told me that if you do that, it will take you 50 years. Instead, this only took me 10 years focusing on one city. So, but I spent a lot of time in Atlanta and in Georgia getting to know the place.
Mike, did you get your question answered? Mike?
He just answered my first question, but I did have a second question when you're talking about WTBS. I thought WGN, the Cubs were broadcast on WGN nationwide several years before the Braves were even in Atlanta, weren't they?
I don't know how national that was. My impression was that until you have satellites, that it's very difficult to do that. I thought WGN starts to go national in like 78 is my impression. I'm certainly not an expert on the Cubs. With PBS, you start to have a very broad regional thing in 73. In 77, he buys the team. He gets hooked up with the same satellites as HBO, which is broadcasting all over the place, and starts sticking that team far and wide. I don't know all the specifics of WGN. I had read 1978 is when it became more national. But I'm certainly not an expert on that, and I defer to other people's knowledge about WGN.
Well, I remember growing up in Dubuque here in Iowa, and we always had WGN, and they had a broadcast signal from Chicago that, reached half the Midwest or farther. So a lot of people picked it up, but I don't think they were national till you got cable in the late 70s and started to see the syndication of cable networks like WTBS and WOR, which showed up in Dubuque in the very early 1980s, which I was grateful for growing up a New York Mets fan, having WOR in Dubuque of all places. But I think it wasn't until cable in the late 70s and early 80s, and then the syndication of the networks, that you started seeing WGN go more nationwide.
There was a piece in Sports Illustrated in like 85 about how Denver had become Chicago Cubs country because of the expansion of WGN. And I think that's where I saw the 78 number for that one. But yeah, it's interesting how these regional networks end up becoming national in scope, and people have these ties to places they may never actually visit in their life. I mean, certainly that's the case with the Braves.
I don't think it became really national until like Harry Carey became the Cubs announcer.
Which is what? Is that 79 he became their announcer?
Late 70s, very early 80s, yeah.
Yeah. I used to watch him on UHF when he was broadcasting the White Sox. Harry Carey before he jumped over to the Cubs. Him and
Jimmy Pearsall, right? Yeah.
Yep, Jimmy Pearsall. Yeah. Another interesting fact just about Atlanta, in the 1980s, I used to work at the Dubuque Packing House, which made the Plumpers hot dog. And Plumpers were in about a half dozen or so stadiums going back to the 70s through the 80s and into the 90s. And Atlanta was one of their big clients in the late 1980s and early 1990s when they celebrated their 25th anniversary. And the Packing House actually produced a lot of baseball cards for Atlanta that Atlanta issued. One was a team picture, and then the pull-apart perforated cards of the entire team. But they also had in-park baseball cards that they produced at the time of Schmaltz and Gavin and Deion Sanders that you could only get at the stadium by attending games that are collectible if you're a baseball card fan.
I'm gonna have to go on eBay and find those. That sounds great. I had no idea.
Wait till I finish purchasing. I've had my eye on a couple.
Sounds good.
So I think the issue with this national broadcasting is the difference between national and large numbers. So cable TV has been around since the 40s and started to become, it was available from coast to coast as early as the early 1960s, but it was not in very many cities.
Yeah,
So the Cubs were broadcasting from coast to coast in the 1960s, but only to a few million households. It wasn't until the early 1980s that cable was available in more than half of the households. And it took that long because it was difficult to get it into large cities.
No,
So
The Cubs.
So like New York City, Chicago didn't have cable. They had WGN locally.
the
So
Cubs had-
that's what I was talking about. And you're right. The Braves were probably available to more households when they first started broadcasting, but the Cubs had been nationally broadcasted, although to a small number of people, since about the mid 1960s. Because I also grew up in Dubuque and remember in the early 1960s coming home from school and watching the Cubs, the end of their game.
The Cubs
Oh, that's
didn't,
interesting.
the Cubs didn't acquire the satellite though until October of 78 with GN. So obviously it must have been some sort of regional network that you were watching the games on, because it sure wasn't the satellite. As far as the Braves go, they were actually their first starting in 77 on TBS. So that's kind of strange that the TBS was first and the WGN satellite followed later. Even though maybe cable, maybe GN gets in there because of cable. Mike, I don't know.
Yeah, WGN started broadcasting their television signal on cable in 1948.
Yeah,
Cable
but
just wasn't available in many households until the early 1980s.
was it your local station in Dubuque or
No, we watched WGN.
Wow,
It was available on cable. Dubuque was an early adopter of cable because it had really hard time getting broadcast signals.
you got
But
lucky.
WGN was on cable early on. There
Yeah.
just weren't a whole lot of households getting cable until the 70s and 80s.
You got lucky.
I'm glad I'm with the Iowa chapter. I've always been curious about the pro sports loyalties in Iowa. I mean, I've always assumed it's Chicago, but there's so many different big league teams in close proximity. I've always been interested in whether it's the NFL, MLB, just how the divides go within that state.
It depends on the part of the state you're from. Eastern Iowa, you're close to Chicago, Milwaukee, Green Bay. So if it's football, you're probably either a Bears or a Packers fan. But there's a lot of Viking fans around here, and then a smattering of, all the other teams. You get into the central and western part of the state, you have a lot of Kansas City football fans. And similar with baseball, central, northern Iowa, southwestern Iowa, Kansas City, Minnesota fans, a lot of them. Eastern Iowa, especially southeastern, you have a lot of St. Louis fans and Chicago fans. So.
Are there any cities that are like battlegrounds between the Cubs and Cardinals, or?
Oh, yeah. You got Cardinal fans all over Iowa as well as Cub fans. So that's always a battle. Here in Dubuque, you've always had a very large White Sox following, because Charlie Comiskey lived here 12 years during his playing career. So there's always been a White Sox fan base here going back, to the very beginning. So the Cub and White Sox go back and forth. The fans do quite a bit. So when they started interleague play, that was really great when the Cubs and Sox got to start playing. So bars around here do well during those games.
I know the Des Moines Register used to every year around opening day do a poll of like what baseball teams Iowans liked the best. And have they done that lately? I can't recall that the last couple of years anyway, but it was always the Cubs had a plurality, and then the Cardinals, the Twins, the Brewers. And
Yeah, we have a
always
big
Yankee. I know
group.
so many fans who are about 10 years older than I am who are Yankees fans because, hey, guess who was on the game of the week every week? And that's what they watched. So they're Yankees fans.
I mean, growing up in Vermont, I grew up in a state where there were lots of both Yankees and Red Sox fans, depending on where you were in the state. If you were on the northern Massachusetts border, if you're on the New York side, there was always a division. Like with pro football, everybody was a Giants fan until Tom Brady showed up, and then all of a sudden there were a lot of Patriots fans. I mean, nobody gave them the time of day until they started winning championships. It was like 100% Giants country until then. So I've always found the interesting states that don't have like an obvious team in them.
The downside of having 6 major league teams around us is that we have one of the worst blackouts deals in trying to watch TV on like MLB.TV and all that. 6. Can you believe that? It's terrible.
There was a lot of picketing and not picketing, I shouldn't say, but protesting and letters to the editor during the MLB game at the Field of Dreams, specifically related to that from Iowans, since
Good,
the
good.
commissioner was here.
Good. Maybe something will come out of it. When I try and watch a Giants game against the Cubs in San Francisco, it's blacked out. Or in any of those 6 parks, which just, drives me nuts, but whatever.
Does anyone here know this website called the 506? It's like maps of like what games are broadcast in which market and stuff. It's I've spent way too much time looking at it over like the past 5 years. It's what NFL games are going to what market, what MLB game, like who's divided up, and it's like breaking news. Fort Wayne is suddenly going to get the Cleveland and Pittsburgh game or something like that. It's very interesting seeing which markets end up with which particular game.
Is that a website, Clayton?
Yeah, I'll send you guys a link. It's I've spent far too much of my life looking at it. That's why the book took so long. It's for all. I mean, I think most people look at it for NFL to see, I'm actually strangely a New York Jets fan, so I'll often look at it and just be disappointed we're not getting the Jets game. It's a website that covers for all the major sports which particular market's going to get what game. I mean, one time I got bored, and I called like some random city in New Mexico. I'm like, come on, guys, why aren't you showing the whatever game kind of thing? And
Well, Clayton, thank you so much for that. Quite interesting.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the great conversation too. That was
Bill is Bill, like you said, is fairly close to Atlanta, a lot closer than Iowa, but he used to be from Iowa, so that prompted his conversation. Thanks for that, Bill. Thumbs up. So we're going to move along here, and what I didn't do at the beginning, which I apologize for, is have all of us really briefly, because there's 20 of us here, give our name and maybe a couple of words, favorite team or whatever. I'll go first because I'm the host, and then I'll just call out names as they show up here on my screen, because I'm sure everybody's screen is probably a little different. We can't just go around the table, so to speak. I've been in Iowa 20 some odd years, and I'm a native Californian, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. And Ralph, you're next.
Okay. I've been in Iowa over 40 years, although I'm a native of North Carolina. I've been a American League favorite American League team is the Detroit Tigers, and also Chicago Iowa Cubs fan.
Cool, Stu.
Yeah, hi, this is Stu Thornley in Minnesota. I'm a Yankees fan, not because of any real connection to New York, other than I love New York. But more and Mike Hoppert asked me this, why are you a Yankees fan? I said, well, because I'm obnoxious, and it kind of fits with everything. But we've done things with the Field of Dreams chapter before. It's good to see you folks. We've had joint meetings, and I always enjoy any time we can get together.
We'll have to do that again.
And I like John's background photo of the Polo Grounds, because I'm fascinated by the Polo Grounds. And so that's the early pre-1911 Polo Grounds.
Clayton, we know pretty much about you, and
I
Bill,
did mention my Iowa connections, but
you had an Iowa connection?
Well, no, my buddy Reggie went to grad. I lived in Minnesota for a couple of years, and my buddy Reggie went to grad school at the University of Iowa, and I remember going to, I think it's called the Hamburg Inn. It's a diner. Is it the Hanover Inn? The Hamburg. It's in Iowa.
Hamburg Inn. Yeah.
Went there a couple of times. Boy, that was great, and I'm a Red Sox fan.
Bill, we've heard from you. Give us a quick rundown.
Well, I was military for a long time, became an Iowa resident, a happy Iowa resident for about 5 years. Now I'm an expatriate because my wife told me I'd be that, living down in the Southeast here, still a Giants fan though.
Yeah, you're here. Carmen. You need to unmute. Oh,
Yeah,
there you
I'm,
go.
okay, so I'm one of the people that Tim talked about because the game of the week in the 60s, was watching baseball with my dad. I became a Yankee fan. But then I went to graduate school in Chicago in the late mid 80s and became a Wrigley Field fan and then eventually a Cub fan nationally.
Thank you. Karen. Need to unmute yourself.
I am a Pittsburgh fan. I can't help it. I lived there. And I then lived in Iowa, Davenport, for 14 years. Then I moved to Leland, North Carolina. And I'm still a Pittsburgh fan.
Thank you.
Sure.
Tim.
I am Tim Rask. I formerly the umpire in chief of the Iowa chapter, but I moved to Wisconsin. So here I am in Eau Claire, still a Cubs fan and a season ticket holder of the Eau Claire Express Northwoods League.
What level is that? Is that
That's collegiate wood bat league.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay.
so they start play late May and go into mid-August.
Are they in the league we went and saw at
Yes, see,
Waterloo?
they're the same league as Waterloo. So
Okay. Thank you.
same division, or not the same division anyway, but we play
Yeah.
in a WPA ballpark and have a nice statue of Hank Aaron outside because Hank got his start in Eau Claire.
Right, cool. John Leopa's up next.
I'm a lifelong Yankee fan.
We know.
We're everywhere. I grew up collecting baseball cards in the 1950s, and your choices were either the Dodgers or the Yankees. And I don't like Sandy Koufax or Don Drysdale.
Well, that's your problem. We all.
I
love
know.
Sandy
No,
Koufax.
I really like them all, but no, I'm a hardcore Yankee fan.
Okay. Ryan.
Yes, I'm a diehard Cub fan living in Columbus, Indiana. I'm a member of the Louisville chapter. So I've heard Clayton speak so many times. I think I've had his speech memorized by now. And I honestly think, Clayton, that I wanted to ask you how in the world, if you've been so aggressive during all this promotional tour, have you been shocked by all this?
I once I got people's email addresses, I've just been a jerk and just emailed everybody a million times until they finally gave in and let me speak to them.
I think you've actually cloned yourself. You've gone into because there's no way one person can do all this. Do you sleep?
I mean, several hours a night. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
And it's Vermont, so I have to shovel a lot. So I shovel, I sleep, and I talk neighbor meetings about my book.
But
Cool.
are you just surprised at how this? I mean, the book's #1 sports new release on Amazon. I must say that. So, are you shocked? What's your reaction? What's your reaction to that?
I'm flabbergasted. I have fallen to #3 though, behind the Ferrari book and the Otani book at this point. But it's I'm so excited by the response to it. It's so much fun being able to speak to all these meetings.
Wow.
Cool. Steve Dunn is up next.
Yes, I've lived in Des Moines here since I retired for about 8 years now. I was born in Southwest Iowa, but I grew up around Chicago, so that's why I have this hat on. My dad was, of course, a Cub fan, so had to be like my dad.
Cool. John Pregler.
I'm a lifelong Dubuquer. Family's been in Iowa since the 1840s. I grew up on stories of Jay Burwanger, Charlie Comiskey, and Hall of Famer Red Faber. So I grew up watching and liking the White Sox, but I am a lifelong New York Mets fan because my father was a New York Yankees fan. So my mother became a Mets fan in the 60s because dad was a Yankees fan. So that's how I became a Mets fan. And just about my background picture, that's actually Dubuque League Park, which existed on 27th and Washington Street from 1895 to 1914. And the first game played there was against Tom Loftus and his Dubuque team, managed by Joe Cantlin, against Charlie Comiskey's St. Paul Saints.
Very good. Keith.
I grew up near St. Louis. My family moved to Iowa when I was starting high school. So I've lived in Iowa for over 50 years, but a lifelong Cardinal fan. I would just say to Clayton, when I was a boy, I remember going to watch the St. Louis Hawks play, Bob Pettit, Lenny Wilkins, at the old arena in St. Louis. I was heartbroken when they moved to Atlanta. That was a long time ago, but I've gotten over it and remain a Cardinal fan.
Oh, I've spoken to a lot of people who haven't gotten over it. There's a lot of St. Louis Cardinals talk in my St. Louis Hawks talk in my book. Yeah, it's a fascinating story.
Enjoyed your talk.
Thank you.
Craig's up.
Sure, I'm Craig Getch. I grew up in Davenport. My dad and family were always all Cubs fans. So my National League were the Cubs. But at age 7, I discovered this guy, as Bob Costa says, he was our guy, Mickey Mantle, and I've been a Yankees fan ever since.
Another Yankee fan.
Register poll. My recollection of the Register poll, of course, it might have been when they were on CBS every week, was the Yankees were the #1 team in Iowa at 17%, and then followed by the Cubs and someone else. So there was a time when you find Yankees fans, love them or hate them everywhere.
Oh, Paul, you're up.
All right. Well, good afternoon from southern Minnesota. Paul Spahalski. Favorite team, probably have spent the most time recently working on actually the Algona Brownies. And currently working on the Sioux City Ghosts. So of the 1920s. Major league teams, I'll watch whatever's on.
I'm not so sure what those are, Paul. Are the Brownies, the Ghosts, were there? What league are they be in?
They were independent Negro baseball teams playing in Iowa.
Okay. Oh.
So, and I do have a blog that's Iowa Town Ball. So we do get some requests and I post there if you want to look for that with some of those things. And if anybody else has worked in Sioux City, I'm looking for the location of Mizzou Park. And yesterday I got a request for some information on looks like a town ball team called the Lincoln Reds. They may have played out a winter set. So if anybody's worked on that, they could send me a chat or a message.
Great, thank you. Tom Bibluski.
Very good, very good. As a youth, our family listened to Ernie Harwell on WJR, 50,000 watt station out of Detroit. So our family continues the patronage of the Detroit Tigers and the Toledo Mud Hens. And in my background, the left with the white T, that's the original logo, roughly 1965, done by a local artist. And then on the opposite side is the current Mud Hen. And as you can see, perhaps the beak is a little more profound and the current Mud Hen is a little meaner, perhaps also a little leaner.
Thank you. Dan's up next.
Hi, everybody. Dan Evans, SABR National Board member. Just here to support you guys, see what you guys are doing. Really enjoying it so far.
Also known as a spy.
Yeah, a good spy, a friendly spy.
Okay.
Certainly not a double agent. I'm also the chief operating officer of the Field of Dreams, and I would love to host a Field of Dreams SABR chapter meeting in 2022.
A friendly spy and a Sabre Day speaker for Mississippi.
That's exactly right.
I'll be in touch with you, Dan, about a meeting this year.
Great, Steve. We could host it at the Field of Dreams and have a lot of fun.
Right. We did host a local meeting in Dyersville several years ago.
But now you got a good in, Steve.
Tim, do you remember that?
Yeah, we met at the at the library in Dyersville, as I recall, and then went out to the
Yes.
field. But yeah, that must have been 15 years ago at the
Easy.
earliest. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, already.
Well, I'll promise a tour, I'll promise fun, and I'll promise all held at the Field of Dreams.
Wow. We, Tim, do you remember we had a local who was a Harry Carey impersonator, and he was quite good?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
No,
Anybody else who was there remember that, or am I dreaming?
Hello
again, everybody.
I went as Harry Carey one Halloween, but I don't think you were around for that party. So
Yeah, there was a guy who, and I think he later on visits to when I went back later, he was doing Sunday programming at the Field of Dreams, but he was pretty good. I remember thinking that guy's great.
Yeah, just threw that out there for the heck of it. Thanks, Dan. Steve, Dunn. It's, oh, well, you've got two squares here. I'm not sure why. Mike is up next.
Hello, I grew up in Dubuque, as I said earlier, watching the Cubs from a young age. So even though I live in Wisconsin, I'm still a Cubs fan, which until 2000. But now it's okay. And I was actually in the movie, The Field of Dreams, although you'd never know it because I rode with one of my neighbors in their antique car as an extra in the very last scene where you see all those cars lined up from a helicopter shot.
Yeah.
I'm in one of those 500 cars.
Wow.
Yeah, it's my claim to fame.
So cool. That is so cool. That is easily my favorite movie. Nice to know. And that's everybody. Cool. We have 20 squares and 18 people. We've got a couple of duplicates. I'm not sure why, but whatever.
I think some people may have shared the link. So for example, I shared the link with my wife, Janet, and she's posted on here under my name. So that may be an indication.
Well, that must be her picture we see.
Yep. That definitely is not Thomas.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, speaking of Field of Dreams chapter meetings, I wanted to run by a quick survey here. So some of you, it doesn't really count, but just, a couple of words. We've been doing the Skybox meeting almost every year, except for a couple. And do we like it? Do we want to continue with it? Just shout out yes or no. That's about it for that.
Steve, I might interrupt for a second. I reserved a Skybox for April 12th, Skybox 316 for the opening home game for the Iowa Cubs. I went ahead and reserved one already. And especially if they still have if the major leagues aren't playing, you could have a pretty good turnout for the Iowa Cubs. I think a lot of people will be anxious to get to a ball game. So I went ahead and called about a week ago and reserved one of the two that are open to the general public. And I think it has a capacity of about 25, kind of crowded. Probably want to cap it around 20 people, but we could get a second one. I think it's still available.
What day of the week is that, John?
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday, okay. We've always held our meetings on Sunday simply because we don't have a lot of money and they're cheaper on Sundays. But it's
We can
something
do
to
that.
consider. Beg your pardon?
I said I didn't do it specifically for the Field of Dreams chapter. Yeah,
Gotcha.
we celebrate one of our friends who passed away. He was a huge Cubs fan, and Pat McClintock, and we've always tried to get one on opening day. But we could do a separate one on the weekend for the Field of Dreams. That'd be fine.
Yeah, okay. So basically you are in favor of SABR having the meetings.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay. That's some feedback. Okay. What else do I have here? Oh, Thursday night, SABR had the kickoff to SABR Day, which was officially yesterday. but it's Sabre Day weekend, so to speak. And they started a new thing called Ballpark Figures. And it's going to be the first Thursday of every month. They're going to have a meeting hosted by Shakia Taylor. And I watched. It was very interesting. Her guest was, I forgot to look it up, sorry. He was the longtime coach at Southern University. Anybody have any comments? Just to throw that out, let everybody know it's out there now. First Thursday of every month, 8 Eastern, 7. Hold on a second. Yeah, I think he lost something.
What did you?
Ralph, what happened?
Yeah, I watched it,
Okay.
the ballpark figure.
Well, you can get back on.
What do you think of it, Karen?
I liked it. I thought it was very, very interesting.
I didn't like the way she didn't introduce the speaker.
Okay,
mean,
okay, you got me there.
It was just, and that kind of set me off a little bit as far as who is this guy? You know, it's, I don't know, maybe just me. But
Okay, that's true because she just kind of started with it right away and asked questions.
Didn't she say no introduction is needed for this person?
yeah, but she assumed it.
Yeah. I was a little baffled too. So.
Yeah, I was kind of upset because here's your first one, you know, big build up, no introduction needed. What?
That was the first time. Maybe she'll refine it for the second.
I'm sure she will. I think for the first time she did a good job.
She did an excellent job. I just wish she would have told me who she was working with. Like you said, introducing her.
It took a little while.
Well, I'll have to watch the next one. Sounds promising.
It's not available online yet. Is it anywhere?
What's that?
I don't know.
Oh, they've announced, it's on the front page of the SABR website, who the next guest will be on May 3rd. I'm sorry, March 3rd.
Yeah, but they haven't posted the link to the last one, have they?
To the last one. No,
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything, but I'm sure they will. I'm sure they're good.
I'm sure they will.
It was recorded.
Oh yeah, I was there too, but I couldn't stay that long. But it was interesting to hear about him. He seemed to have a lot of enthusiasm for helping kids out.
Yes.
I didn't know what to expect. It was certainly different from your typical SABR experience.
Okay.
Exactly. So I'm going to check that off my list here. Curious, what everybody think about the Hall of Fame vote?
Didn't surprise me.
I was very impressed Ortiz got in. I think that really opens the door for Clements and Bonds to get in the Veterans Committee in this winter. I think with Ortiz in, people will think, oh, let them all in.
Well, being a big Bonds fan, I hope you're right, but I don't think they're going to get in that easily.
Well, but with you only need 12 yeses now. You only need 12 yeses. I mean, if Harold Baines got in.
It all depends on the makeup of the Veterans Committee, which, as we've seen in the past, the Hall of Fame can set it up to get anybody elected that they want just by the mix of this. They've done it before, and actually having two. I was thrilled for Jim Cott. I'm a big Cott fan, but it helped for Oliva and Cott that Carew and Blyleven were on there, and just one different person on that committee, and it could have been Dick Allen instead.
Yeah, exactly. He missed by one, didn't he?
Yeah.
For the second time, for the second cycle in a row.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's even, who do they even put on it? You know, well, it used to be the old Frankie Frisch, you know, legacy of,
Sure.
and then in 2003, they went to a lot of voters, which in one sense is great. You know, there's less influence for any one voter, but
Didn't work.
you know, but well, it's not going to work with a 75%. You know, when you have a ballot with
Yeah.
Tony Gwynn and Cal Ripken on it, it's very easy for there to be a 75% consensus because there's a huge range of worthiness. But with the ballots that come up in the Veterans Committee, you've got 20 people or whatever who are pretty much of equal worthiness, and people voting independently, it's unlikely that anybody gets 75%. Now, when they get back in the smoke-filled room and operate like a jury and probably, you know, influence one another until they can get there. But, you know, that's why we have Bowie Kuhn in the Hall of Fame, 2008.
I was a little surprised. I was a little surprised about Johannes after all this time.
He was one, I guess, if you kept putting him on the ballot, it'd be enough support and he'd eventually make it, and he finally did.
Other than Dick Allen, who's left to argue about now?
No, there'll always be, you know, this next time is going to be more of the previous era. You know, they had really, this was what they call the golden era one, but, you know, to go back where I'm sure Bob Musil will never make it, but, you know, is there a ballot that Bob Musil would be on that goes back to the 20s and 30s or something?
Alex Rodriguez is coming up pretty soon, isn't he?
Well, he voted, he was on this year's ballot.
No, well, he should
Only
be
got
pretty controversial.
30 something percent.
Yeah.
Well, the voters like to show their disapproval. You know, I was reading, we read the Ernie Banks book, and he was the 12th player to get it in its first year of eligibility, where it was still rare enough that that was something that happened kind of organically with Sandy Koufax, Ted Williams, good enough player that there was such consensus that the player would make it immediately. And that's maybe what one of the things that hurt Harmon Killebrew, along with the overemphasis on batting average, is that by that time voters were saying, making the first ballot thing like a singular honor. And I think Killebrew is a Hall of Famer, but not a first time Hall of Fame. Well, hell, either he is or he isn't, you know. So with Koufax and Williams, it was kind of more organic that it just happened. And now, of course, the voters, with whatever their differing and inconsistent morals are on everything, but some of them probably will start voting for Rodriguez, but they had to send them that message the first time through.
Thoughts on Pete Rose, since we're talking about the Hall? I believe he belongs in the Hall, but he should have no connection to baseball other than being in the Hall.
I think the greatest thing that's ever happened to Pete Rose is not being in the Hall of Fame for 30 years, because he's been the most talked about baseball player in the country for decades because of this perpetual debate. He would just be a guy in the Hall of Fame if he'd gotten in. He would be, you know, alongside Robin Yount or somebody, another great player. But because of that, he is probably still the most famous baseball player in the country because of this ongoing discussion.
That's a good point. You know, if I go out and speak, people say, should he be in the Hall of Fame? Well, the question is, should he be reinstated, and or should the Hall of Fame have a rule that prohibits people on the ineligible list from being in there? I think it's a reasonable rule. And the other one is if they will ever reinstate him. And of course, if he could ever put on a better contrite act, he probably would be. And I want to be careful on what I say, but watching what's going on with sports betting right now, I can see more of a case for saying, okay, let's finally. They'll probably do it when he's dead, just to piss him off, you know. Okay, now he'll get in, and you know that's probably.
I think baseball is done with Rose, Stu, because Manfred said to the Reds and the Phillies, you can put them up in your halls of fame for teams, but it came out that something happened with Rose with an underage girl, and the Phillies were going to do it, and they decided to scrap it.
Well, that bothers me more than the, yeah, that's a good point. And I even learned something about Andrew Jones. I thought there's a Hall of Famer. He's not underage girl, something else, that if the Hall of Fame voters are taking some of that stuff seriously, I'm very happy for it. But yeah, baseball led up to the point. Remember, Rose couldn't even be honored or anything. And at our official scores meetings a few years ago, they asked each of us to introduce ourselves and say our all-time favorite player. And by the way, I was one of about 3 people who said Mickey Mantle, but Ron Roth from Cincinnati said, we're sitting there in the major league headquarters, and he said, God, mine's Pete Rose, but do I dare say it? I said, I don't know what the hell, but he stood up, he said, Ron Roth, Cincinnati, my favorite player is Ty Cobb.
Well, I believe that a lifetime ban should be for a lifetime, but it should end at the end of your life. And then at the end of your life, you should be eligible. Both Jackson and Rose, what they did was not necessarily on the field. Their sins were the lies after the fact, which tended to get more people in trouble than anything else, just ask President Nixon. And so I think the ban should end at the end of their life, and he should then be eligible and allowed in the hall.
We had a meeting with the Joe Jackson birthplace thing, and turns out they're not exactly unbiased on it, which I wouldn't expect. And they raised the same thing on Jackson, and I don't even know what the name of the list is anymore. Roberto Alomar is on it now, and he's staying in the Hall of Fame, and I think Mickey Callaway is on it. But it's a good point, John, that you could make it lifetime. But one of the things to point out on Joe Jackson is that he was eligible for the Hall of Fame for 40 years after his death, because it wasn't until 1991 that the Hall of Fame got that rule, which they put it in there to keep Rose from being elected. But I don't know if there would be, and I see what Jackson did is more egregious than what Rose did.
Jones, by the way, had a domestic abuse incident Christmas Day of 2012.
I'm glad that's being considered, if it indeed is. It seems to have hit Omar Vizquel, because that was more recent. And there are others in there. Even recently.
Aroldis Chapman comes to mind.
Yeah, I don't know if he'd ever get it either. I'm a Yankee fan, and not a fan of his, or Domingo Germán.
It's interesting to compare how baseball has dealt with Rose, how the NFL dealt with both Paul Hornung and Alex Karras, who got suspended in the middle of their careers for this. Hornung goes in the Hall of Fame like the minute he gets out of the league. Karras just gets in last year. I think he died in like 2012 or something like that. So he certainly had the basically lifetime ban from at least that aspect of officialdom. So it seems like even within that organization, it's unclear how to deal with it. I mean, I'm not an expert on their particular cases. It would have struck me that they would have both been pretty obvious football Hall of Famers, but their situations were dealt with in such different ways.
And the fact it was only a 1-year suspension for those guys, not lifetime.
Yeah.
What was Hornung's deal? Was he caught betting?
He was betting on the Packers.
He was cavorting with gamblers. I think it was a guy in San Francisco, some I guess mobbed up guy, or I forget all the deal. Him and Karras were palling around with the wrong guy too.
Yeah, Hornung had connections through his ties at Louisville and the racetracks there as well, and was a lifetime gambler. So, but he always claimed he bet on the Packers to win, never against them, which was a safe bet back then. I'm a diehard Packer fan.
Okay. He wasn't making nearly as much money back then as he could have been making today. Yep, that might have prompted his betting.
He got some endorsements though, didn't he? I feel like he was, kind of a matinee idol type. I mean,
he was the golden boy. Yeah, he was known as the golden boy. So,
yeah, well, I can see why, independent of the gambling, I grew up in the 60s watching that, and Horning was a much bigger name than Karis, so even outside of the
Right.
gambling, there might be more debate on Karis. And, you know, I don't know, Jim Taylor was awfully good too, but, you know, Horning is the golden boy, and I don't know, just everything about his swashbuckling probably put more attention on him.
Interesting, guys. Thanks for the chat up on that. Okay, here's another item on my list. In fact, it's the last item currently, and it's kind of a personal thing. I'm sure that many of you have heard of Spitball, the themselves as the second longest running baseball magazine or publication. And the longest would be Baseball Digest since 1945, maybe? 42, yeah, who said that? Oh, Ralph, thank you. Anyway, Spitball has been doing the Casey Award for 30, this is their 39th Casey Award coming up in March. And it's fairly well received, and it's anyway, long story short, the Casey Award this year has been awarded to for 2021 has been awarded to Joe Posnanski for the Baseball 100, which is a terrific book. I've not met Joe personally. I would like to at some point. I've seen him talk in person 2 or 3 times at SABR conventions, and in Kansas City, he did a deal with Bill James that I went to. Very entertaining. So the Casey Award will be given out on March 6th, a Sunday. So that's a month from today, actually. And I want to go to that luncheon that they have. I'm sorry, dinner. And if anybody in SABR, the SABR local chapter, is interested in going, please let me know. My wife is not a big fan of us going at this point, but I do want to go to Cincinnati, meet Joe Posnanski. If anybody's interested in going, let me know. The plan is to do it's Cincinnati from here is a long day. I would split it into 2 days, maybe make it to Champaign, and then Champaign to Cincinnati, and then spend the night in Cincinnati after the dinner, and then come home the same way, 2 days. So that's, like I said, that's just a personal thing. If you might be interested, let me know. Anybody else have any agenda type items?
Can I throw out the Landmarks Committee, because Tim is in Eau Claire and maybe he can help with doing verification on Carson Park, the bust of Hank Aaron, and I see that Mike Hoppert has signed up to be the lead person on the Northwoods League. And John, I good to know that's the Dubuque ballpark, not the Polo Grounds. It's got that same kind of support system on the posts. If there's anything for that ballpark, a marker or anything else, that would be something that we'd want to get into the Landmark Committee.
Is that ballpark the site of current Comiskey Park in Dubuque?
It is not. It was always believed to be, but it is not. Right now, Clower Manufacturing has a warehouse sitting on the property.
I do remember seeing some contemporary accounts or reading in the papers in Dubuque that that just like at the Polo Grounds, people would line up on the bluff and watch the game for free. So
Yeah, and you can see in
another
the
thing they had in common.
you can see in the picture the knothole gang sitting there, the little kids looking through the knothole of the wooden outfield fences watching the game. So they were always referenced in the local papers as well. But I do have two items here, Steve, if you don't mind.
Sure,
One's a
sure.
quick question. And like a lot of SABR members and our friend John Leopa here, not only am I a fan, but I'm also a collector, researcher, author, historian. And I've recently come across this baseball. It was found in a crawl space here in Dubuque. It's an old figure eight style. I'm assuming it's circa 1858 to 1865. It was found in a school associated with the church that's been around Dubuque since 1855. The building was built in 1885, and it was found in a crawl space. So I figured it belonged to the school. It's not a belt configuration. It is a figure eight configuration baseball. It stuffs very tightly, but it's all cloth or linen. So it's not a twine round, a wound ball. It's a little bit bigger than your average baseball, a little bit lighter as well. So I'm trying to find out what is the oldest known baseball in Iowa. And could this potentially be it? I know we have a few people here from Iowa. So if you have any information, I'd be interested. You can definitely tell this is very, very well worn. It's been stitched time and again. You can see where they've overstitched in places or went around old stitching that is just burst because it's so well worn. And it was found in the downtown Dubuque area where baseball was being documented and played going back to 1863. So I don't know if it's tied to that or the oldest lore, although I don't have it documented, is baseball was first introduced and played in Dubuque as an exhibition game in 1855. Although we don't have any hard documented proof of that. So I'm just trying to figure out, is this the oldest ball in Iowa? So if anybody knows anything, I'd be more than interested. So with that, our last meeting, the Skybox meeting, I was unfortunately unable to attend. I was supposed to. I actually still have the ticket sitting right here to my right. But I was going to present because I was fortunate enough, my wife and I, to attend the Field of Dreams game. And I was going to share some images and just my experience. I know you scheduled, Steve, this for 2 hours. I'd be happy to pull up some pictures and just tell you a little bit about our experience if people are interested.
I am.
Please.
There we go. Okay.
Right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and if you'll permit me to share my screen. I'm going to go ahead and hang on a second while I move some stuff around. Okay. Because we have some time, I'm going to go through the little bit longer version of the images versus the abridged. So first off, they did an excellent job. Dan, I applaud you and everybody else that's involved in the design of the field, the building of it. The entire experience was phenomenal. I go to a lot of sporting events, NFL and Major League and whatnot, and this is definitely right up there with an NFC championship game or anything else I've ever experienced. So it took us all of a half hour to leave our home in Dubuque and be parked and standing in front of the sign in front of the field. And that was with a lot of people going in. So it was very well organized. And this was one of the first things you got to do. And people would go up and get their picture taken in front of the sign at the driveway that takes you into the Field of Dreams. Let me see here once. You guys aren't seeing your guys' pictures, are you, of who's all seeing this, or are you just seeing my images?
What do you mean? We see your images.
Oh, okay, okay. Because I have a single screen and I see everybody's images plus my images overlaid. So I just want to make sure you're seeing just the images. So when you come in, this is obviously the Field of Dreams, people walking around, and then you have the ballpark, Major League ballpark on the other side. And to get to the ballpark, you actually had to enter the corn right here, and it took you in through the corn about 40 rows or so before you got into a path to take you into the field itself. So it was super cool. People were walking around. They had a John Deere tractor, just like the one that was used in the movie, that you could get your picture taken with, or get a hat from John Deere. You had basically two parking lots, the one right out front where they normally have parking for events at the Field of Dreams. Then off to the left over here was another big field that you could come in from the Farley way into the field, which worked out perfectly. Probably the only complaint was it was a little hot that day and humid, but everything else was just perfect. By the time you got to the gates right here, you got in and through really quickly. It was painless, and the staff was great. Probably the only complaint I had the entire event is there were only 3, I think it was, official merchandise trailers. And from the very beginning of the opening of the gates till past midnight, there were at least 100 people in line at every single trailer for the official merchandise. The official game balls sold out right away. I was disappointed I wasn't able to get one of those. So some more of that would have been nice. But other than that, it really was laid out perfectly, and they thought of every single little detail. So you had people wandering around everywhere, checking out the house, the field. You could go back and forth between Major League Ballpark and the Field of Dreams field. Major League Baseball channel, MLB, had a studio set up right along the tree line near the house in the shade. And of course, you can tell who that is in the middle of the picture, none other than John Dutton. That drew really big. So there were people everywhere watching that. Obviously, he was a big hit. And when he was moving to and from that, all the women were screaming out how beautiful he was and good looking. And of course, he was blushing. And then everybody, this is my wife, took the opportunity to get their picture taken walking out of the corn. This is myself in my throwback Dubuque White Sox jersey from the 1950s. A lot of father-sons. This is a father-son duo there. A lot of father-sons there playing catch, just taking it all in. I actually tried to get my father to go, but he deferred. I wish I could have, because I've literally never played catch with my father. Although all our family vacations growing up, because we really didn't have any, was going to Wrigley Field to Cub games, because he was a Cubs fan as well as a Yankees fan. So, but a lot of father-sons. Here's another father-son getting a picture taken at the tractor. My wife and I on the tractor. So this is us heading towards the field, going into the corn to head over to the game. It was really cool. These two young ladies here, this young lady right here actually works for the city of Dubuque, and so does my wife. And the night before, she was downtown Dubuque having a drink, and she happened to be sitting next to the commissioner of baseball, just out by himself having a drink and checking out the scenery. And he asked her,
BS2 is what I call him. BS2.
He asked her, "Are you going to the game?" And she's like, no, I'm not. He's like, "Well, why not?" She's like, "I can't afford it. The tickets are outrageous." He's like, "Well, would you go if you could go?" She's like, "Absolutely. I love baseball." So he's like, "Tell you what, give me your email. There'll be 2 tickets in your box later tonight." And sure enough, he had seats behind home plate that the commissioner sent her to go to the game. So that was super cool. So something nice came out of BS2. This was just a sign, Yankee Stadium, 997 miles, guaranteed rate field, 206, and then Dyersville. So that was kind of cool as you headed over. What was really cool as you were walking through the maze, the corn maze, the long row that took you to the baseball stadium, was they had different cutouts of the baseball players, as well as different music and scenes from the movie playing, coming out of the corn. It was eerily cool. And at night when you were leaving and everything was dark and they had the tiki lamps all along, it was really super cool. So it was just a great experience. But here was the second of the merchandise trailers, which was right next to the ballpark, the only one right by the ballpark. And then you had one outside the gates by the parking lot when you first came in, where Guy Fieri's group was serving up whatever that concoction was that he came up with. And this is where they had all the stands then where you could get food and whatnot. It was my understanding from some locals I talked to that were associated with local government and helping organize stuff, that Kevin Costner, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kevin Costner actually spent the night at the Field of Dreams, and they had a trailer set up either underneath the stands or near the stands that he stayed at. And then this is when you first walk into the field. Everybody's first view was of the field, and in the background, the Field of Dreams home and the barn and everything else. And you can see the walkway here as you come in through the corn maze down towards the field. So, and the field was just absolutely beautiful, so well maintained, obviously, for this game.
John, did you try the Guy Fieri thing?
We did not. By the time we got past it and realized where it was, we were in the gates already, so we didn't. We heard other people say it was pretty good. I didn't hear of anybody having a heart attack from it. So this was obviously right after they came through the fence line there, which was all really cool because Kevin Costner first just kind of walked all the corn and slowly walked on the field, and they had the eerie Field of Dream music playing in the background, and it was staged. We were a little disappointed that Costner didn't throw Dwyer Brown the opening pitch, but afterwards I think that probably made sense that they forewent that and did it the way they did.
My wife was disappointed that Costner didn't throw out the first pitch.
Yeah. So these are just then pictures from the game. We had great seats, as you can see. These were from our seats. We were in the White Sox section, but there were quite a bit of Yankee fans around the area. So this is one of my favorite pictures I got from our seats during the game, was the hot air balloon that had passed over there in the top of the third inning, which was super cool. I'm a skydiver, and I used to run a skydiving operation in Lancaster, Wisconsin called the Tri-State Skydivers back in the 80s and the 90s. And right after the Field of Dreams movie came out, for about 5 years, we would get calls from all over the country, including Texas, Georgia, California, of people who wanted to come to the Field of Dreams, but wanted to skydive into the field. But Lansing wanted nothing to do with it because of the insurance, and I don't blame them. So we never ever did, but that was always something we always wanted to do, was skydive into the Field of Dreams.
Wow.
And then you can see the balloon coming down and landing. The skies that night, were just like the skies in the movie. You could not digitally enhance a more pretty sky as the night started to go to twilight and into dusk. And then periodically you would get this beam coming from the light that looked like it was coming from the heavens and shining on the Field of Dreams the darker it got. So that was a really cool effect from the camera.
Maybe from a UFO.
This is me and my wife just doing a selfie from the stands. These are just some more pictures, but you can start seeing the sky starting to turn the pinkish hue that it did overnight as the game progressed here through the innings. This is the flyby that was done. These were the airmen that flew by, and then this was actually Kevin Costner coming down to his seats near our section. He just sat right down in here. So we got a picture of Kevin walking by.
Did you see Dwyer Brown at all?
We did. He was actually, we saw him speak up over behind home plate. He did an interview, I think, during the game. So we saw him and he was all over the place. If I'm not mistaken, he's owns a building in Dyersville and he's around the area quite a bit.
Yeah.
So these are just pictures during the game. And then this is from here on out, this is where the night sky starts really turning that pinkish hue and purplish and really starts making it even more magical the whole evening. The game was good, obviously, but it didn't turn into a great game until the ninth inning. And obviously at that point, it became legendary. Thank goodness, because I think it sets the stage for all future games there. It helps ensure future games there. And I think if this game was lackluster, it would be hard to, not hard, but I don't know that the momentum going into the next game or the game after that would be as big. This is just more of a panoramic view. This lady's head is not as thin as that. So this is just stitched together pictures. It was really neat when they started and Kevin Costner first came out at the beginning of the game. This lady and her husband here, he got very emotional when Kevin Costner started to speak and kind of the whole father-son want to have a catch, and they were playing scenes from the movie. And you start looking around the stands and you saw a lot of people getting choked up. So it's just that, you know, uniqueness and special tie that makes, you know, the Field of Dreams this generation's It's a Wonderful Life, like Kevin Costner said while they were making the movie. I do have here, then I'll just kind of speed through. A-Rod sat over in the next section. And of course, as he was going up, fans were chastising him, "Where's J-Lo?" and stuff like that. I didn't think was fair, but I thought it was funny. So this is Tim Anderson. Just hit the home run. He's just getting ready to circle first base here on the walk-off. So I was going, excuse the language, ape shit crazy with the home run. And I wasn't screaming it out loud, but from the crack of the bat, you knew it was a home run. And all that kept on going through my mind at the top of my voice was, "Giants win the pennant, Giants win the pennant, Giants win the pennant," because it was that kind of emotional moment and the crowd was just going crazy. And I was sitting next to a loudmouth Yankees fan from New York who was giving me a bunch of guff up to that point. So I had to give him guff a little bit at that point as Anderson here has his arm up going around first. And here he is then coming between third and home with the fireworks going off. And so it was just, you know, like I said, and as you guys saw on TV, absolutely magical. So it was, unfortunately, we did not win the lottery. So we did get our tickets on the open market, so they were rather pricey. But my wife and I decided, you know, we were talking about, do we take a weekend trip to New York City, to Las Vegas, or let's stay home, spend a little extra money. This was better than going to New York or Vegas like we do to get away. It was cheaper, even though the tickets were fairly expensive, because you know, it took us a half hour to get from our house here. We didn't have hotels. We didn't have airfare. We didn't have all the expense of going out to eat. We stayed after the game for over a half hour and just sat there and watched all the excitement, then walked out and stayed on the Field of Dreams field then afterwards. Because that was just magical too, as you walked out and just the field all lit up and the excitement of people leaving. So it was a great time overall, and I highly recommend if you get a chance to go to the Cubs Cincinnati game, which has a lot of history related to Dubuque, the Cubs, and Cincinnati. That was one thing as a SABR member I wish they would have did a better job of celebrating Dubuque's history related to Charlie Comiskey, the White Sox, Hall of Famer Red Faber, who grew up 30 miles away from the Field of Dreams, started his pro career like Comiskey did in Dubuque with their first pro contracts. So hopefully they'll look at the fact that Tom Loftus and Charlie Comiskey, both at Dubuque, were managers of the Cincinnati Reds. Loftus took them back into the National League in 1890. You know, play up that. Loftus was also the manager of the Chicago Cubs in 1900 and 1901. You know, so there, and Loftus is buried in Dubuque, one of the co-founders of the American League. So I'd really like to see that aspect of 19th century SABR and baseball history celebrated or recognized a little bit more. But overall, you know, I don't know how they improve on the game itself.
Wow, wow, wow.
So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Or...
John, did you say you don't remember playing catch with your dad?
Correct.
Wow, I am in the same situation. My dad introduced me to baseball by bringing home one night in November of '58 an uncut sheet of Topps baseball cards, which from that era are super rare. Where he got it, I don't know. I was 13 at the time. Guess what I did? I cut them up. I grabbed a good pair of scissors and I carefully cut them up. Made them baseball cards. And 58 baseball cards are valuable these days, but an uncut sheet is probably 5 figures.
Yeah, so you know, I never played catch with my dad, but me and my mom spent a lot of time watching WOR and New York Mets baseball games, especially 84, 85, 86, and 87. So I thought about her the entire time during the game. So it was emotional for me as well for that reason, because I just lost her 2 years ago. Overall, it was a great experience in that regard as well, because it brought back a lot of memories this whole summer of my mother.
Did they leave the stands up there at the new ballpark? Did they leave those stands up, or did they take them down after the game?
You know, I can't answer that because it's been a while since I've been out there, but I believe they took everything down. Dan would, if he's still online, can probably answer that.
So they're going to have to put them all up again for this summer's game.
Well, I think what's going to happen, and I'm involved in local politics too, and I think the movement and the desire, I know it is from county supervisors and city councils in Dyersville and Dubuque, would be to get utilities out there and build more of a permanent ballpark structure for Major League Baseball and make this an annual event. And I'm sure Frank and Dan and others managing the place now would love to see that occur as well. And I think there's momentum in that direction. Now the question is, how committed will Major League Baseball be in that regard? What kind of investment would they be willing to make? But I think that just the overwhelming success of the game last year has them definitely interested.
Hey, John, do you mind if I step in for a moment?
No, go ahead, please.
First of all, absolutely incredible. Brings just a huge smile to myself and my girlfriend Kathy's face as we're watching this. There is our plan, Frank Thomas and my plan, is to build a permanent stadium with all the support that we have in Iowa, Dubuque County, Dyersville. And our goal is to have a permanent facility there for the 23 game. We will have water on site for the 22 game, and we'll have sewer on site this fall. But I'm so glad the images that you captured, John, absolutely spectacular. And I want to talk to you because some of the photos would be just unbelievable in our offices. And I'd rather have a local with their photos than a professional. So great job.
Here, here. I agree.
Appreciate that. Yeah, Dan, feel free to reach out and we can definitely get things squared away.
Wow. That's a great ending to our meeting, John. Thank you so much. I'm tearing up even thinking about it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen the movie, and the ending is just fabulous, just fabulous. Dad, do you want to have a catch? which was not the last line in the movie. Does anybody know what the last line was? It was Dwyer Brown saying, as his dad, I'd like that. And that's how the movie ended. Wow. You put a great cap to the meeting, John. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Anybody else have anything? Any questions, any agenda items? Good meeting. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming.
Great job, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for organizing. Definitely.
Nice to be back, even if it's just virtual.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
Thanks-
remember,
thanks.
let's have some fun one night at the Field of Dreams as I host your chapter.
Oh, we will do that, Dan, definitely.
Dan, is there a better time? Are you thinking like May, June? You thinking before, after? I assume, leading up to the next major league game is probably out of the question. But, that's something I know John Liepa and I have spoken about, is maybe doing some type of symposium, within the weeks or around the Major League Baseball game too. So I don't know what the art of the possible there is.
John, I'll tell you what, as a board member of SABR, I will do anything I can to heighten our presence for the game. I love the Field of Dreams passionately, and things like that with our event center. We can do a myriad of things. So John, you and I can get together and let's figure this out. But candidly, I think, for all of us, we know the corn needs to be up. So we've got to wait until I've got an Iowa girl here. So there's no way we can do that before the corn is 11 or 12 feet, but maybe immediately after, or maybe just before. And let's be creative and let's make it a really fun experience for everybody.
My first visit to the Field of Dreams, and my wife is a native Iowa, an Iowa girl, as you say, Dan. My first visit, the corn was maybe 4 inches tall, and although it was a disappointment, it was still something to visit the Field of Dreams in person. After having seen it, I don't know how many times. How many times have you seen the movie, Dan?
Oh my God, Steve. I think I know every line.
Yeah, we love to go over the lines. What's your favorite line in the movie?
I just like Dwyer Brown's finishing line. I think it's awesome. And whenever I'm with Dwyer, I always nudge him a little bit. Whenever he says, hey, let's do this. And I always say, I'd like that.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. There's a scene where they're sitting at the bottom of the stairs and they're comparing notes, and he's trying to convince her that he needs to go to Boston. And they talk about the Green Monster, and she says, "The Green Monster, is that the big wall in left field?" Do you remember that scene?
I do.
And they talk back and forth for a couple of minutes, and then she turns and she says, and she starts scampering up the stairs, and she says, "I'll help you pack."
That's right.
That's one of my favorite lines.
And I've talked to him, and she just loved being in that movie. She's a huge baseball fan. Her dad was the crime reporter for WBBM radio in Chicago. So her lineage to baseball in Chicago goes back forever. So it was really exciting for her.
The funniest scene definitely is the one where Kevin Costner kidnaps James Earl Jones. I mean, my gosh, that's hysterical.
Yep.
What we have to do is when we have the meeting, we've got to have a game of catch.
Oh, no question. Absolutely.
Got to have a game of catch.
But not on Zoom.
So bring your glove. Got
If you
mine
don't-
ready.
Yeah, and if you don't, we've got gloves. So we've got lots of gloves at the field. We got baseballs and we've got bats. And we also have Advil and Aleve.
Well, my sister-in-law gave me a vintage baseball glove last year for Christmas, so I will definitely need some Aleve if I use that thing because it's going to hurt my hand.
Don't forget a masseuse and a chiropractor too on call.
Okay.
Thomas, you might be a very popular person that day.
I can run interference, being the guy calling up those part-time employees or contracted employees.
Maybe we could even have a 3-inning game.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great. Hey, I want to touch on one thing. John mentioned the merchandise. And John, that's one of the things that Frank and I have worked on with Major League Baseball already, addressing that problem. And this year, that problem won't exist. And there'll be far more game ball availability and far more merchandise available the night of the game. You just learn from the experience. I don't know that we can have a better game or have better weather, but the ancillary things with the game, we're going to try to step it up another notch. And we're really looking forward to those two great teams and the history with those two charter franchises. It's going to be exciting as heck to have them there.
Wow, I'm excited. Anything else, anybody? We're down to a precious dozen or so here. Thank you
Is
all.
that our
for
next,
coming.
is that our next meeting then?
What's our next meeting? We didn't really talk about that. That's a good point. Thank
Well, if
you.
we do a skybox meeting, we can do that
Oh.
early, and then we can do a fall meeting around the MLB game.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds great. I will send out a group email through SABR as I have had in the past, and I'll select several Sundays, and we will do a skybox meeting then. Any chance you'll be able to make it, Dan?
I hope to. You were talking about the Iowa Cubs opener. Was that the day you were talking?
That's when John was talking about, but that wouldn't be an official SABR meeting because he's already acquired the skybox.
Yeah.
How many people are already ordained, so to speak, in your group, John?
None. One, myself.
Really?
I didn't want to reach out, Steve, until after this meeting.
Okay.
That group is not that big and they're not hardcore baseball fans like the people here today. And so I just thought, a couple of friends and my wife might be, but there could easily be room for 15 to 20 people if we wanted to do it that early. But like I said earlier, if you want to push it back when it's a little bit early, further back in the season, that'd be fine.
And Steve, I'm living in Dyersville most of the time now, so
Yeah.
I can make sure I'm in town for that kind of a meeting.
Cool.
Steve, I'll reach out to Phil Dixon again too. And, he had a conflict that last time we tried to get him to come down from the Negro League Museum. He just
Right.
published another book too, and see if he might be able to join us.
Well, it sounds like we have a couple of things tentatively, a couple of skybox meetings tentatively. One for opening day and then a Sunday later on in the season. So, what sounds good. And then a meeting that Dan wants to host in Dyersville. I'm excited. Oh, I know what I was going to ask the group, but there's still a few of us here. The talk is that the minor league season is going to go on, even if the major league season doesn't. I'm not sure how that's going to work. But what do we think about that?
It's better than no baseball at all.
Oh, absolutely. Dan, any thoughts about that? About minor league starting on time?
Well, the players who aren't on the 40-man roster would participate, but players who are on the 40 wouldn't be allowed.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a sad, possible sad thing for some of these up and coming young guys in terms of just staying on the major league roster. That's kind of, hopefully they can get this thing going, these issues dealt with and get this work stoppage ended. Although it seems like every time I think they're making progress, it seems like every step forward, there's usually 2 or 3 steps back. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, yeah. The last couple of days, it said that MLB looked into a mediator, and the Players Association turned it down. So I don't know. You're right, Ralph. Couple of steps forward, couple of steps back. They're not making much progress.
The owners were supposed to make a proposal, but they decided to bring in a mediator instead. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, and the Players Association turned down the idea of a mediator. So I'm confused. I'm confused. Well, my stomach says it's lunchtime. It's beyond lunchtime. I'm getting a little shaky, so I'm going to call it quits here if anybody doesn't have anything. John, again, thank you so much. That really filled out some time. Yeah, Carmen is clapping. The pictures were marvelous.
Yeah.
I'm super envious that you were there. I wanted to go. I had a shot at a couple of tickets, and I just couldn't see paying for that kind of money. But what can you do?
How much were they, Steve? You pick on my mask?
Well, they were really high priced if you went through an outside source. So what was the face value was what, 300 and some odd?
Oh my.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've never paid. I've been to some all-star games. I've paid a couple of $100s for face value tickets to all-star games.
Just one in the making. Bye-bye.
Craig?
Sorry about that. I had a call from my wife.
And of course, Dan gets in free.
Yeah. Forgot I was not on mute.
Well, I'm gonna push the end button here if anybody doesn't have anything to
Bye,
add.
everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks all. Thanks, Steve.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.